For legal reasons, I'm obligated to tell you that this is being recorded.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Janice MacGregor. I'm at Miss Regal World 2020 to 2021, and I live in Saskatchewan, Canada. I'm here with Jasmine Pearce today. Jasmine, tell us about you.
Well, hi everyone, I'm Jasmine Pearce from a little county called Norfolk in England. Very rural. Lots of people though. I'm currently in college studying English, law and history in my final year with hopes on doing broadcasting and multimedia journalism at university. That about sums me up in a nutshell.
That's amazing. Like, you're so well-rounded, and I find that very impressive.
Thank you.
You're also being very humble right now. So, for those of you who don't know, Jasmine was a finalist in Miss Teen Regal World, and she's also currently, tell us your current title.
Miss Teen Global Darling, Miss Global Darling Spokesmodel, and Miss Global Darling Charity.
Yes, and she just won all of that last month. So she's a very well-rounded and accomplished young lady. So thank you, Jasmine, for joining me here today.
Having me.
Oh, you're welcome. It's my pleasure. So today we are going to talk about mental health in general. Jasmine is being so brave and courageous and admirable by coming forward and wanting to share her journey with us. So Jasmine, why don't you start off by telling us about your diagnosis?
Yeah, so it was more towards the last year of high school where my anxiety started to become a bit more prominent. I believe it always kind of been there in the background, but going into the last year of high school after suffering years of bullying, which really kind of diminished my own self-esteem, I felt heightened the anxiety a bit more. And it took quite a while for me to kind of be able to come forward and say, I do need to go see a doctor about this. We kind of self-diagnosed myself to begin with because I kind of ticked all those boxes. And when we went to the doctor, he did confirm it. And it was kind of that realization that this is something I'm going to have to keep dealing with. And I spiraled downwards for probably the first 6 months of high school. I was unable to go into the building. I'd have a panic attack even leaving the house because I knew that's where I then had to go. I felt that the school I was at was a really big trigger for it. And it was probably one of the big triggers because I wasn't completely aware of what set it off and why I had anxiety and what the problems were. I think hindsight is a wonderful thing. And I can kind of picture now that loneliness is one of my biggest triggers. I think definitely throughout high school with being bullied so much, that made me feel quite isolated. And in a way, to try and combat that, I kind of tried to gain some sort of acceptance from other people. I felt that if other people accepted me and loved me, that I would feel less lonely, which kind of in reality did the complete opposite, because I ended up changing who I was to fit in with other people, which completely ended up making it about 100 times worse. And it got to a point, it was only really last year, where I realised that I don't need acceptance from other people to be happy, and I don't need other people's love or clarification of me for me to be who I want to be. And kind of going from getting diagnosed with anxiety to kind of finally getting to a point where I don't really give a crap what other people think. I want to be kind of unapologetically myself, and if other people don't like me because of it, then I'm kind of finally in a place where I'm okay with that. Yeah, it's definitely not all rainbows and unicorns at all. I still have plenty of bad days. But I'm kind of at a point now where it's the people who love me for me without me putting on a facade to get people to stay. They're the people that are worth having and are worth hanging around, rather than the people who stick around because of the facade.
Right. I find that very empowering, what you're saying about, like, you don't like me, your problem, not mine.
Yeah.
So, would you say that bullying was kind of one of the underlying causes of your anxiety?
Yeah, 100%. I think from about, what was it, like year 6 in English terms, which I think I was about, I want to say 9 or 10, I moved to a school which at the time seemed like a really great idea because it was a great school, but I didn't quite click with the people there. And children make those innocent comments. And I was quite, or I'm told quite often that I'm very mature for my age. And their comments probably affected me in a way that they didn't realize they would, about how I wasn't as rich as they were. I didn't own swimming pools and ponies, and I didn't own a leprechaun and things like that. I ended up leaving that school because it wasn't, looking back on it, I don't think the girls understood what they were saying and the effect that that can have on people. So I kind of decided with my parents, because it got to a point where I couldn't go to that school. No, going there was a case of just wasn't going to happen. I think I remember hanging on to my dad's car door because I was adamant that I was not going in. So they moved me, obviously with my consent, to a different high school. And I joined kind of halfway through year 7, which is the beginning year of our high schools. And everyone had kind of already established those friendship groups. Mm-hmm. So trying to slot myself in to groups of people that had already been quite well established was a big challenge in itself. And I faced a lot of issues because of that. It's kind of, no one really wants to deal with the new girl. And the school at the time thought that their buddy system was a really, really good idea. And I do think that it's a good idea in some ways, but I was put with a person who I don't really think wanted to kind of be in charge of looking after the new girl, which is fair enough completely. And I think she then ended up resenting me because of that. And it got kind of a few years into that school, and I would get phone calls from people from blocked numbers in the school, kind of shouting abuse at me. I think I had my hair pulled by one girl. And it wasn't, I'm still not entirely sure why. It's kind of, even looking back on it now, it's a case of, what did I do to you? And it's trying to really understand, like, I can't think of what I did to them. And I think that high school in particular was a big part of me trying to please other people. And I think at one point I ended up bringing a skateboard in because I was around people who liked that kind of thing. And I thought, well, this might get them to like me. And it was kind of, I don't know why I did that. Kind of looking back on it, I thought, that's not you.
Yeah.
And trying to get other people to like me. And that's why I think it was so hard when people then started bullying me. It's a case of, all I've done is try to get you to like me. Mm-hmm. It was just got to a point, it's like really stupid, trivial things. I remember sitting down outside on the grass, and they kind of came along and they wanted to sit there instead. And I was like, yeah, but I'm sitting here now. It's like, very big field, sit somewhere else. And I said to them, oh, can you sit somewhere else? And they didn't want to. And I think I was with a couple other girls, and they said, no, we're staying here. And I don't really understand why, but it was me they decided to target out of that group. And I remember them kind of dragging my bags away. I think one of them kind of grabbed my ponytail and pulled it so I'd move. And it was just a case of, why? I think that is such a big thing that people who get bullied go through, is the question of why.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always apparent. Like, I think it has to be an underlying issue with the bully, that they've got something that they feel they maybe need to prove.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think that when there is bullying, it's something that, you know, they're looking for someone else to take out their frustrations on, like whatever their problems are, whether it's a problem that they're having at school, whether it's socially or academically, or a problem at home or in another social setting. They're trying to prove their worth, and that they trying to prove to themselves that they do have value by trying to devalue someone else and
make it more on top.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know if this excuse is used in the UK that often, but in North America, people just sometimes, parents of bullies, write it off as, well, kids will be kids. But when you think, they use that excuse in the UK too.
They think that, oh, it's a learning curve of growing up. You know, hormones is something that's used quite a lot between girls. And I guess from where it's not hormones, it's decency and human behavior.
Exactly.
Hormones are getting, upset, emotional, but they're not all the time. It's not a constant thing. And I think that there are so many easy excuses and easy way out that people use that then kind of diminishes how someone who is bullied feels. It makes it harder for them to speak out because it's normalized. It's like, yeah, every school has bullying, yeah, you're going to get it anywhere, but you shouldn't. And there needs to be some sort of combat for it, because it gets to a point where, how is someone who is getting bullied meant to speak out when it's normalized like that?
Well, I think having parents justify it or create excuses like kids will be kids, you're not doing your kid any favor, because you're not raising children. You're raising children into adults. And by creating or allowing an environment where they're allowed to treat people like that, you're basically teaching them that as adults, it's okay for that relational aggression to continue. And I mean, you sometimes see it in the workplace that, I mean, we call it bullying when it's younger, and then relational aggression when it's adults doing it. But you're not whether it's teachers or parents, by excusing the bully's behavior, you're not doing them any favors. We're not raising children, we're raising adults. And I mean, like, I don't have kids of my own, but as someone who was bullied, and like, I'm physically dealing with the fallout of it 24 years later, because as you had mentioned, you transferred schools. My family moved from Edmonton, Canada to Saskatoon, Canada when I was just a little bit before my 12th birthday. So I was the new girl as well. And, it's always fun to pick on the new kid. So I had my back turned, and this one boy was like, "Hey, Janice." And when I turned around, he kicked a soccer ball, or I'm sorry, a basketball at my nose, at my face, and like there was blood everywhere. And like I still have a deviated septum, and I've kind of been, I mean, it's now at the point where I need a septoplasty. And I'm thinking, I'm dealing with physical damage from bullying from when I was a kid. And like the boy didn't even get in trouble for it. Like he didn't get detention, he wasn't suspended or anything. And when you think about it, with everything that you mentioned happening to you, with adults, that's assault, that's harassment. So like you need to stop behavior in children before it becomes criminal when they're adults. Like you mentioned having your hair pulled, that's assault. You mentioned those phone calls, that's harassment. Like if we don't allow it in adults, at which point in time we shouldn't be allowing it in kids. But if you're excusing it in kids, at what point in time do you stop it? So,
absolutely.
I mean, this bullying thing, people need to stop it right now.
Yeah, I guess, like you said, that it's normalized as a kid, and then when they start doing that as an adult, suddenly they end up behind bars. And in a way, you've got to feel slightly sorry for the kid because they've gone from being excused for bullying to ending up in prison. They don't see how is this a jump? I did this all the time and it was fine, and now suddenly I'm behind bars. It needs to kind of be stopped at a young age and understood at a young age before it gets to that point.
Right. I agree with you to a certain extent with that, but I do think that every individual comes to a point in their life where they're like, you know, should I do this or should I not do this? Or would I like it if someone does this to me? Probably not. So maybe I shouldn't do it to someone else. So, I mean, at some point in time, they have to start taking responsibility for themselves. So you had mentioned it being diagnosed formally by a doctor, like you had self-diagnosed and then you saw a doctor. So can you tell us about how you approached I'm assuming that like your parents drove, because I know that you only recently got your learner's permit. So I'm assuming that your parents drove you to the doctor. Can you tell us about telling your family about how you felt and what you were going through?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I left the school where I was kind of physically hurt, I went to a new school, my third and final high school that I went to. And it was okay. There were quite a few incidents in years 9 and 10. But going into year 11, it was kind of like a switch went off in my brain a little bit. I think looking back on it, I think it had been building up for quite some time. But coming back, I think it was after the summer holidays, I would just get panic attacks for going in. I think the first couple of days, I had a physically sick feeling in my stomach. And I thought, you know, I just feel sick, you know, I'll be fine. And then it got to a point where the sick feeling went away and it was just emotions and headaches and breathlessness. And I think my parents saw it properly before I did. Because I was living it and I was there, but I wasn't properly processing what was going on. And it kind of came to more of a mutual understanding that I needed help rather than me approaching them. I think they did see it before I did. And I think part of me thinks that they hoped that it would die down on its own. So we all tried to kind of carry on as normal in a way. And it got to a point where we all agreed that my normal wasn't going to be my normal anymore, and that I did need to see help. So they drove me to the doctors and they both came in with me. And talking to him, I don't think I was emotionally prepared for it. But I don't also think, looking back on it, I would have realized that I needed to be. I kind of went in with the assumption that it would kind of be a bit more of a, how do I phrase it? Physical kind of exam issue that you get when you go to a doctor. It's like, I have a headache, here are some tablets. And they don't really kind of talk to you about it too much. But going in to see my GP, it was probably the longest doctor's appointment I've ever had. And it was so kind of in depth in the questions. And I think he ended up drawing a diagram. And I think he called it like a vicious circle, where you have the trigger and then you kind of have the thinking about the trigger. Then you get emotional and overwhelmed, and then you have a panic attack. And then you can kind of just keep going round in that kind of vicious circle. And it was when he was explaining all of that to me that it more clicked in my mind that this is what I had, and this is what I now need to try and deal with and overcome. And it was, I wouldn't have got through any of it without the support of my parents. I mean, there are times where myself and them tried approaches that really backfired and didn't work. But I think with mental health, it can be a bit like getting help from a doctor. There are approaches that work and there are approaches that don't work, and you don't always know which is which until you actually try them.
Mm-hmm.
At the end, we managed to kind of settle into what worked for me. But the initial diagnosis, I think, was definitely more of a kind of mutual understanding rather than me going up to them and saying, I'm struggling.
Okay. So would you say, you mentioned that your parents noticed this first. Would you say, though, that it would have been easy for you to hide this? Like, did people at school or teachers notice this, or was your anxiety something that was easy to hide?
I think there's the first few weeks I didn't go into school at all, and I think I just kept calling in sick. But at home, I am so close with my family that they know me inside out. So I don't think I would have ever been able to really hide it from them. But going into school, it was, for people who understand mental health, I think it was quite obvious in a way, with the panic attacks and getting overwhelmed and not being able to physically walk through a door. But I think the kids at school who didn't want to know about that, in a way, put it down to attention seeking, being a drama queen. So I had to kind of deal with my anxiety and all those rumors going around about me at the same time, which didn't help in the slightest.
Right.
Trying to over.
I keep on, it just hit me with that yesterday being World Mental Health Day, and then with what you're saying. We keep on talking about mental health, but it's the same as a physical condition because it's neurotransmitters, and there's a physiological cause for it. Yes, there was a mental trigger or a mental, there was something that caused it mentally, but there's this cycle of neurotransmitters, and it's a physical cause. It's an invisible illness, but it's not just people who are attention seeking, as you were accused of. There is a physiological, neurological reason for anxiety, depression, and all of the other mental illnesses. They're invisible illnesses, but they are real. They're valid. I mean, it's not attention seeking or someone's being over dramatic or whatever, because I mean, I'm sure that feeling that way, the last thing you wanted was to draw more attention to yourself.
Yeah,
So,
it was very much, I kind of wanted to kind of sink away because I knew that the school didn't necessarily handle it in the best way. And I have a lot of kind of feelings against them for that. And they would leave me outside in the corridor having a panic attack. They would try and force me into my lessons. And I think their approach was tough love, and that if I got into that environment, then it wouldn't be as bad as I thought it would be. But it was. And it got to a point where all I wanted to do was deal with it without everyone's eyes on me. But them putting me in the middle of a corridor or getting me into my lesson when I was in the middle of a panic attack or having an absolute breakdown, and knowing that I was walking into those classrooms crying and everyone was staring at me, it was like just like a gulp in your throat. I remember going in at one point and I was standing in the front of the class for quite a while, and I kind of just froze. I was there like, oh my God, I know everyone's staring at me. I'm standing right in front of everyone, crying, and I can't move. And it was that kind of claustrophobic feeling of all I want to do is go somewhere else. And I know everyone's watching me go through this. And I know a lot of them put it down to attention seeking, being a drama queen, just trying to get out of classes and things like that. And it's not what you want when you're trying to deal with anxiety, with having one of my triggers being kind of quite worried about what other people think of me. And knowing and hearing people say stuff like that just heightened it even more.
mm-hmm. So it sounds like your anxiety is more on the severe side of the spectrum, because just for anyone watching this, I want to make it clear that anxiety is more than just being nervous. It's a far more intense feeling than that. Nervousness is normal. It's, from an evolutionary perspective, being nervous in certain circumstances is advantageous, but anxiety is more intense. Anxiety is not just being nervous. And like with my experience with anxiety, it was very invisible. No one knew about it. This was 12-ish years ago, and no one knew about it. But yours was obviously more severe. Like, I mean, you mentioned having panic attacks, being like crying and not being able to enter your school. So it sounds like a very severe side of it. But I want to go back to what you mentioned before about your parents you're very close to your parents and they noticed this before you did. What advice would you give someone who doesn't have a support system like yours?
I'd definitely say that a support system doesn't always have to stem from family. There are quite a few schools which have brilliant systems in place and are so understanding. And I think knowing that whether it's at school or whether you just call the doctors yourself or even friends, that they can be just as good as a support system. Or even there are so many places you can call as well. I know in the UK, Mind is a mental health charity that is huge over here, and the work they do is amazing. And I believe they've got lines you can call or text 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it's kind of understanding that it's okay to not feel like you can talk to your parents, that there's no shame in that, but knowing that you do need to talk to someone. Mm-hmm. And that can be someone over the phone from a trusted charity, calling your doctor yourself, or just going into a pharmacist or chemist, or going to school just anywhere that you find or can find someone that you know you can trust and confide in.
Right. Okay. Yeah, you mentioned numbers that you can call. I guess I don't have them written down, but I know that there are mental health lines that, regardless of what country you're in, you can find one in your country. They're usually toll free and they're completely confidential. So if you don't want to say your name or what town or city you live in, that's fine. You don't even have to give them any information about you. And these are 100% free to call. So, I mean, Google or whatever search engine that you use, just Google mental health helpline, and you'll find something that's in your country that you can call. So that was a very good thing to mention. I hadn't even thought of mentioning that, Jasmine. So we got to know each other through the Miss Regal World system. And since then, I think we've got to know each other even more.
Definitely.
Because like, if you look at our Facebook messages or Instagram DMs, like we have these long conversations. But one thing that I really like about the way that you are presenting yourself is that you don't let anxiety define you. You're not like, hi, I have anxiety and my name's Jasmine. You're like, hi, I'm Jasmine and I happen to have anxiety. It's not the thing, it's not the core of you. It's just one of the facets of your life. So I find that very admirable. And I think it's something that, regardless of what kind of mental health issue someone's dealing with, whether it's anxiety, depression, an eating disorder, suicidal ideation, it's important to realize that that's not who you are. That's a part of who you are, but it shouldn't define you because I mean, we can look at it and say, oh, there are 7 billion people on the face of this earth. But yeah, 7 billion's a lot, but you're the only one that's you. And it's so important to see yourself as that unique individual and to not let this one part of your life define who you are.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that I really admire about you, Jasmine. You don't let anxiety define you.
Thank you. I think it's so important as well for people with mental health to realize they are more than their condition.
Mm-hmm.
Anxiety ruled me for years, and I think I let it affect who I was before I even realized that I was letting it do that. I think me trying to please other people stemmed from having anxiety because I had a fear of letting people down and doing the wrong thing. And I mean, I know it's only, like I said, last year, probably, or even the past couple of months, where I realised that, so what? Yeah, I have it, and that's okay. I also have an immune deficiency, and it's like that. You know, I've got anxiety and I've got an immune deficiency, and they're just part of who I am, but it doesn't make them who I am. You know,
Exactly. I love the way that you said that. Like I have them, but it's not who I am. I know that in the epilepsy community, I have epilepsy. A very popular phrase is, I might have epilepsy, but it doesn't have me. And oh no, go ahead.
No, I was saying that I really, really like that saying. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, and I think it's really useful, especially for anyone who has epilepsy, especially the people who are recently diagnosed. But I personally don't use the saying because I find that a lot of times it almost comes across as though the person is trying to prove it to others. because I personally know that epilepsy does not have Janice, so why do I have to keep saying it? So I don't do it. There's this campaign every March. So March is International Epilepsy Awareness Month. In the US, Epilepsy Awareness Month is November. But for us and over in the UK, it's March. And the campaign is like, I'm 1 in 100, because 1 in 100 people have epilepsy. But I don't participate in it because I'm not 1 in 100. I'm 1 in 7 billion. Like, if you only look at my health, then you're boiling me down to just that one trait. But I'm more than just epilepsy. I'm more than just 1 in 100.
Yeah, you're 1 in 7. That's what makes you so amazing as a person, because you're you in kind of in other people.
Exactly. And I love, because you're only 17, and I love that you have such a deep understanding of this, like both the mental and the physical health issue.
Thank you.
So I wanted to add, like you mentioned how anxiety has had an effect on your school life, and I was wondering, how does it affect your social life?
I think it definitely affects it quite a lot. I kind of struggle, I've always struggled to click with people my own age. I don't tend to share the common interests. So I've always struggled to make friends. And I think that's kind of where another big part of me trying to please other people came from. And I think when the anxiety really started to rear its head, I started to feel very isolated, because it felt in a way that people didn't want to be friends with me because they didn't want to have to deal with it. And it's kind of became more baggage to other people rather than something I just needed support with.
Okay.
And I've always kind of tried to make friends, and it's never really worked. There have been a couple of really, really great people who do stick around. And I think now, kind of coming through anxiety how I have, I can see that having those couple of great people who have stuck around are more important to me than having loads of people who stick around because they don't know who I really am, and I've put on this facade to make them like me.
Mm-hmm.
I know that, especially through pageants, that's kind of where I found, what is it, my people. In a way.
Your tribe, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It was kind of coming into this group of girls and women who understand it and want to help, and they don't see you for, oh, she's the girl who has anxiety, or oh, she's the girl that has that, or this, or whatever it is. They see you as, you're this person. You may have other things branch off that, but you are this person. And that's what everyone in that community kind of band round to empower, is that one person, in a way that it's kind of, if you're struggling, we're here to support you. And one thing that I really, really saw that embodies that is that my first pageant, someone didn't have a dress. And rather than kind of allowing her not to perhaps get as good a mark as she could have done, someone gave her theirs. And it was just that kind of, I think that moment for me embodies what pageants are about, in a way that you can have something wrong with you, you can have forgotten something, but someone will be there to pick you back up again, and there'll be no judgment in it. It's kind of an innocent, we're here to laugh with you, or we're crying with you, and that's fine.
Well, okay, my last in-person pageant was in 2018. And so it was just slightly over 2 years ago. And I remember during the intermission, so the dress that I wore for the evening gown had a really long train. And during the intermission, I was putting the train up because we were all going to go back out on stage at the same time. And I didn't want anyone to like trip on my train and like face plant. So I was, kind of like twisted around behind myself, trying to find like where the loop was so I could put it over the button. And then one of the other girls, she was like, just come here. And she did it for me. Like she was exhausted. She was sitting down. She had her heels off and she was just trying to regroup during the intermission. And she still took the time to help me with that. The earrings that I wore for opening number, I had smaller earrings with me because I'm not like a pageant pro like some of the other girls were. And they were all like, no, those earrings are too small. So like one of the girls let me borrow a pair of earrings from her. And the girl who ended up winning International Miss India, she actually helped me retouch my hair backstage because we were in New York City and it was my first time ever getting I forget what it's called. They blow dry your hair, a blowout. I think it's called a blowout. And so, you get the volume on the top and like a little bit of a curl down here. New York City is very humid. So from leaving the salon to getting into the Uber, my hair just went flat. And when we got to the venue, Kamini, that was Miss India's name, she had done her own hair and she had her curling iron with her backstage. And she was like, I'll fix that for you. So, I mean, we're not like what you see in the movies. Like we are a community of people who help each other. And I mean, there are a few bad apples or rotten apples or whatever the saying is, but the vast majority of us are decent people. And I mean, even look at us, like we formed this friendship where we talk about like everything. And I mean, at no point in time were you like, Janice, I think you would look really good in an orange evening gown. Orange is not my color. I look horrible in orange. You never lied to me to try to get me to look bad or anything like that. And, we started talking during the pageant. And I mean, you are in the teen division, but you're very mature. So with me being slightly older, it was still comfortable. You're laughing because you know my real age.
You're still 21. It's fine.
I'm just barely older than you. We could be sisters.
Practically.
But like, even with the age difference, like, you're very mature, so you're very easy for those of us in the Miss division to talk to. And even after the pageant's over, we're still in contact. We're still messaging each other the funniest, silliest stuff. And I mean, that kind of shows you that pageants aren't just what you see on TV. It's not like on Toddlers and Tiaras. Do you guys have that show in the UK?
I think so, yeah. I can't ever watched it.
We're subject to it too. Yeah, I don't